Well, Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. One of the questions I get asked fairly often is, what angle do you grind your bowl gouges at? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. But before we get too started, I'm going to show a real brief PowerPoint presentation. You bring it up, go to the second slide. This is a pamphlet that AAW put out a few years ago. If you're a member of AAW, you can go online and download it. It's about, I don't know, 60 or 70 pages on sharpening. And it goes into a lot of detail of hand sharpening and jig sharpening and all different kinds of tools. So I'd encourage you, if you're a member of AAW, just go online and download this. It's really a fairly comprehensive magazine. I've collected a lot of sharpening information through the years, and when I bought a Carter gouge a while back, they sent me a sharpening guide as well. And a couple of things I want to point out on here, I know it's a little bit hard to see, is if you look at the second picture, you can see how the sharpening guide for the one-way system is set up. And then he talks about the angles of how different tools should be ground. And if you look close, you can see bowl gouges at 50. If you've got a B flute, 50. If you got a U flute, 60 degrees. So there's a little change. He also talks about a 2-inch stick out, how far the tool sticks out of your guide. And then he talks about this angle being 23 degrees, which is about where this one is set. The next one. And if you ever buy or you go to SWAT, you can pick up one of these sharpening guides from Carter there. I went online with Glenn Lucas a while back, and Glenn has 4 different handouts that he has. And I'm going to pass them around. We're going to talk a little bit about Tormac being one, and Sam's got the Tormac system, so he's going to talk about sharpening on Tormac tonight. Next one. Glenn also talks about the woodcut system. I think Craft Supply and Packard sells the woodcut. I've never used it, but it's available through either one of those 2 places. Next one, please. This is the Robert Sorby sanding system. They call it the Pro Edge. I don't know of anybody that's got this. Has anybody here ever used one of those? It's a little bit of a different way of sharpening, and I'm not familiar with it at all. And the last one that's on his recommendations is the one-way system. Next. And this is the one that I use personally. I think it's probably the most popular of all the sharpening systems that are on the market. We go to the next slide. You can see that Glenn has got this set up with 3 different angles on how he sets his sharpening guide up based on which tool he's using. If you go to the next slide, you can see which he recommends setting on setting 1, set it on 3, which is down a little bit, on a 3/4 inch bowl gouge or a 5/8 inch bowl gouge. And his angles end up being 65, 55, 55, 45 for a bowl gouge or a spindle gouge, and 60 for a bottom feeder. So there's quite a dichotomy of what those angles should be. Next slide. I don't know who put this slide together, but they talk about a standard bowl gouge being 45 to or 40 to 50 degrees. A bowl gouge with swept back should be, I think that says 45 to 50 degrees. Stuart Batty recommends 40 degrees for his outside bowl gouge, and I don't know what he recommends for the inside of his bowl gouge for inside the bowl. But you can see everybody's got a little different idea of what the angle ought to be and what this jig setup should be. So if you go to the next slide, this is Doug Thompson, and he probably makes more wood turning tools than anybody on the market right now. And he recommends this setup for his jig, which is this one. I've copied it. And he recommends 60 degrees for a bowl gouge, 40 degrees for a spindle gouge or a detail gouge, 20 degrees for a scraper, and I can't read that last one for a skew. We'll do our skews by hand anyway. So again, now we got three different views of what the jig ought to be set up at and what the stick out of the tool should be. Doug recommends a 3/4 inch, or excuse me, a 1 3/4 inch stick out, where the other two people have recommended a 2-inch stick out. Let's go to the next one. So this is a one-way pamphlet, and I'm sorry, it only shows half of it in this. I'll pass this one around. This has got both inside and out. One Way recommends, if you look at this, you can see that they recommend the same angle setup that Doug recommends. And he also recommends a 1 3/4 inch stick out of the tool out of the jig. I bought a 1 3/4 inch jig from Doug Thompson a few years ago. And that's what I've been using to adjust the stick out of a gouge in this jig. And I've also made one, and there'll be one on the giveaway today. They're pretty easy to make. Take a standard piece of wood, drill a hole in it. I put a nickel in the bottom of it so I don't keep wearing the bottom out. And so this way I get an accurate 1 3/4 stick out. I think there's one more. Is there one more slide? This is an article that was in that Sharpening magazine that Kirk DeHeer from Craft Supply put out quite a few years ago. And he recommends a 50-degree grind on his bowl gouges. And if you go to the next slide, you can see he also recommends the 23-degree angle on the jig and a 2-inch stick out. So I can't find any true source that says the jig ought to be at this angle, the stick out ought to be at 1 3/4 or 2 inches, and the bowl gouge ought to be set at 40 degrees or 45 degrees or 50 degrees or 55 degrees. I can't find anybody that has come out with a standard that says that's what it ought to be. So tonight we're going to talk both about the one-way system that is the most popular. We've got 3 one-way systems set up here so we can do a lot of sharpening later on. And then we're going to talk, I'm going to turn this over to Sam and let him start by talking about the Tormek system and how it works.
So, like John said, the predominant grinding setup is the one way. Tormac has been around for a long time. manufactured in Sweden. You know, they have a Viking history, so they know about sharp tools, and they also know how to pillage. It's a particularly costly grinder. The reason I did it 40 years ago was the flexibility. I can do everything. If I have my bowl gouges, my skews, my carving tools, knives, I've got jig to do, planer, wife's scissors. It's a lifesaver there. The whole range of activities that you can grind on them. Initially, they were all stone wheels that you had to maintain, and they were in a water bath, which made it a little bit messy at times. The guy at Woodturners Wonders sells the CBN wheels, has a wheel that fits the Tormac system, which makes it really nice because it's a CBN wheel and you don't have to use water with it, which makes it nice. Theirs is all driven off of a very varied amount of jigs. You know, they've got a flat plate to go on there that you'll use that for your scrapers. Much like the one way, they've got their own jig. Instead of going in a cup in the back, they fit up onto a slide bar that allows you to set your tool. You've got jigs that allow you to do your skews, your roughing gouges. You can vary the angle on your skew as you go through that, which works out pretty nice. Again, there's a small jig that you can use for small carving gouges and stuff like that, where you want a flat edge across the front, that you can set them up there to do that. And then anymore, you've got tools that have the scrapers that you can put on there. So there's a modification of this tool that allows you to hook one of those scrapers onto the end of it, and you can sharpen that complex shape consistently on the Tormac. The whole key around these systems is repeatability, making sure that once you've got something that really works for you, that you can immediately go back and set up and do that same grind and minimize the amount of metal that you've got to take off to get to a sharp edge again. You start buying some of these gouges and you spend a lot of time grinding on them to get an angle. You chew up a lot of value in making dust. But then once you've got the jigs to set up to do it, then it makes it nice because you've got repeatability. You can go right back to that same setup on that same jig and then turn right around and just take enough off to sharpen the edge. One of the things that I tend to do a lot of is when I set up, I find an angle that I like, that works for me. Like John said, it doesn't have to be this angle. It doesn't have to have this swept back. It works for me. And so I want to be able to go back and repeat that so that I can get that nice sharp edge on it once again. the thing that I use is label maker. I'll take the label maker on the collar here, and I'll put the settings that I use for the jig for that tool, so that I can go back and quickly set up again, load the tool and sharpen and very quickly. So here's I use a label maker, and I put that information on the label maker. I key it in, and then I just put it on the collar of the tool. And then that way I pick up this tool, and I know that, okay, I'll use this particular jig, and I'll use this particular setting on the angle and the depth outside the end of the tool, the overhang, and then how far away from the wheel that this bar rests. So in following up on this one, the first one I want to set up is the distance from the edge of the tool to the wheel. And so using the indicator hole on this jig, and there are two wheels, and that gives me a triangular pattern that is when I have the offset such that both wheels are turning. I've now set the offset away from the wheel that my jig will rest on. Now, the nice thing about this is whether I'm using a big wheel like this or I'm going to a smaller wheel like this, the setup is the same. You have 2 points on the wheel and then one on the bar. And that sets that unique distance for that particular diameter wheel. The Tormac is constant speed. I think it's 50 to 90 RPM. It's a really slow spinning wheel. Yeah. And so because of that, it doesn't generate the heat that you would have with some of the other grinders. Now, fits in this jig. I've already got this set at the appropriate angle. On this side of the tool, there's an offset to measure what the distance from the end. And so for this particular one, I said that I want to come at 75 millimeters, since it's the Vikings that are doing this and they use metric. And then what that does is that sets the angle of the tool right up against the wheel to give you that proper edge. Now, I always double check. So a handy marker allows you to put mark on the end of the tool. And then I always just double check. And you make fine adjustments such that you match the last grind that you had. And then when you do that, I'm sorry. Now, as I've said, this wheel, I do all my finish stuff with. It happens to be a 600 grit. And then a lot of the roughing work I use, it's on a one-way type. And of course, the wheel there is a smaller diameter. So it's going to give me a different curvature on the surface of the tool than this one does. But now I can cut and then come back and set up and repeat that grind. And you're really taking a minimal amount of material off of the tool. Depending on the angle here, John has previously told you, all it does is change the amount of sweep back on the edge. So if you come almost straight down here, it'll give you like a 45 degree with negligible sweep back. You go further back, it'll give you even more. Such that if you have something that you really want a lot of sweep, like a detail gouge, you can set it and you've got a lot of side sweep on the tip of that tool. So the nice thing about, again, it's just a whole series of jigs. If you want to cut your scrapers, you can set your scrapers up. Again, you find your angle that you want to match. You can lock this platform in, and then you can go through and grind that edge to give you the burr that you want. When you use a scraper with the platform on this side of the tool, you'll get a burr on this edge. If you don't want a burr on that edge, then you would sharpen it on this side because the tool is rotating this way. And then as you sharpen it again, you have that same angle, but you end up with no burr on the top side of the tool. Another one with the platform. A lot of you'll have tools like this where you have a high-speed insert. You've got a nice flat edge here. A real pain in the rear to try to sharpen those without some sort of jig. But here you can, again, set it up. And then because it's flat on this surface, then you can take and sharpen that insert and get it nice and sharp as well. Pull up the burr on there so that you can go in and do your hollowing and stuff like that. So it's, again, handy piece. You'll one of the other things, it's a cheap fix. Once you get them sharp, how do you keep from dinging the ends of them up? Well, all I did was took a piece of dowel rod or a piece of hard maple and you turn it around, you drill it, and then hot glued in a couple of rare earth magnets. And you can set that on there, and your tool stays protected from getting bumped when you're moving it around. Or in my case, when you stick it in the bucket beside the lathe, that when you go down to pick up another tool, that you don't leave a little U shape in your forehead because you've got it protected. They've also got jigs. I don't want to go through a lot of these, but they've also got jigs that allow you to turn your skews. That hold them in place. And once you've got this angle and you want to match that angle of the skew, take you a square, put it up against the side of your wheel, mark your line with a fine tip marker. Then you can come up here and again, you'll set you've got dimensions to match that, but you'll align this such that aligns with that line that you've marked on the wheel, and then you can lock in the angle, because this angle will move back and forth to allow you to change the angle on the end of your skew. And then once you've got it set, then you sharpen one side, then you flip it over and you sharpen the other side. Now, if you like an Allen lacer where you've got it flat on one side and then it curves around, then all you got to do is, as you're sharpening, you can just rotate your tool away from the flat, and then you'll end up with that rounded edge. So you do skews this way. You also, with this jig, you can change the insert, and this piece will come out. Then you have another piece that you can insert. Then you've got this V block that sits in the base. And then you can come in here with your large roughing gouge. Okay. And that keeps the tool positioned such that as you do your grind to sharpen it, that this stays flat. It's not a swept back like the others. And then as you rotate your tool, well, there's really nothing that you have to freehand. That, again, you'll set your distance, get your angle where you want it, and then as you rotate this up against the bar, it keeps it flat so that you've got a flat cutting edge on this side, and then you've got your bevel that's consistent across the end of the tool. In addition to you do your parting tool the same way. You can insert your parting tool so that you can lock it in place. Now your parting tool is perpendicular to this surface, so that when you grind it on this side, your surface is going to be flat, not tapered one side or the other. And then when you flip it over and do it on the other side, you'll have it consistent on both sides. Much like what you had with the skew, if you don't want it flat, then just rotate it. Now, getting it the same on both sides is more of a touch. You take once you get it set, that's right. Because and then. But it's a whole lot easier than trying to hold it square without a jig, for me. Yeah. So again, it's a lot of different variations on the types of tools that they'll handle. The last, again, much like with the bowl gougers, a tool that will hold the scrapers. And again, you set it up where you set your angle of your bevel. And then once you've got that set, by adjusting your bar in and out, then as you rotate the tool and keep the edge of the tool on the wheel, then you'll get a consistent bevel throughout that entire range. And then you unscrew it, flip it over, and do it on the other side. Or you don't have to do it on both sides. If you want to use it as truly as a scraper, I tend to use mine as a negative rake scraper, so I cut both sides. As we've talked about scrapers, I've got set up on mine that you don't always have to go back and regrind. Once you think your burr is gone, I'll use a diamond hone and hone the surface, get it nice and sharp. And then I'll come back over here where I've got a Veritas, couple of wheels on there, pins that are really hard carbide. And you can sweep it across there and draw up another burr, much like you would do if you were trying to put a burr on a cabinet scraper. And it's in between. It's a quick way to put another burr on there without having to take a lot of steel off. So a lot of flexibility. And like I said, I bought it because I could do so many other things other than my wood turning stuff. I mean, they've got a series of gouges to do jigs, to do knives, to do carving tools. They've got one that's just phenomenal for drill bits. Just a phenomenal edge on a drill bit. When my dad passed away and I was going through picking up stuff, he had a bucket of drill bits that he'd had for years. And, his day, they got dull, you just threw them in a bucket, Well, I bought, again, Tormac's not cheap. You know, they know how to pillage, but they have probably one of the finest sharpening system for drill bits that I've ever seen. And you put that drill bit in there and you put a double faceted point on the end of a drill bit. And I went through and resharpened all those bits in that bucket. And the amount of money that I had to spend on buying new drill bits more than paid for the jig. So it's an interesting tool. I use it as well as the one-way type of system. Not for everybody. But if you get one on the deal, they're worth the money. And really the big improvement for me was when I went from the stone wheel to a CBN. When they retrofitted them with the CBN, it just made life so much easier because the wheel diameter never changes. So it does a nice job. Any questions? This is a 600 grit. And like I said, I use it when I'm getting ready to do the final couple of passes, and I've got them dialed in on the settings between my one-way system and this, that I can just put it on this, hit that edge, and get it nice and sharp, and then go. All right, the Tormac, the base Tormac with the stone wheel and just a few of the jigs is probably about $600. And then as you go through, these are like $60. You know, that's like $55. So, like I said, they know how to extract a pound of flesh out of you, but they're consistent. Every time you use it, you get the same grind. So it's not for everybody. And if you really want to get high class, they've got diamond wheels now that I haven't told Nancy about that. But you know, Tormac is you know, their base business is industrial sharpening. So, you know, they've got a lot of research into the wheels, and they just kind of bypassed CBN and went straight to industrial grade diamonds. You know, those diamond wheels are about $350, you know, but you only buy one. I mean, this unit I bought 40 years ago, so I've amortized it.
We talked a little bit earlier about these jigs that the one-way system uses. And I was trying to figure out what really changes when you go from this angle to this angle. So I have two identical gouges here. They're both sharpened at about 55 degrees. One of them was sharpened with the jig set at 23 degrees as the and the other one was sharpened as the Doug Thompson setup. And you can see the difference when you look at it. Really, the only difference is the amount of swept back and the dimension of the wings on the side. I'll pass these around so you can look at the. You can see the one on the left was done with a 23 degree jig, and it doesn't have the same swept back that the one on the right has. The one on the right is the Doug Thompson setup. It's probably just easier if I pass them around. So a lot of what my friends Sam talked about with the Tormek, we do as well with the one way and standard low speed grinder. I much prefer low speed grinders to high speed. High speed is okay, but you got to be really, really careful, particularly if you're going to hand grind anything. This grinder I set up several different ways. Stuart Batty many years ago came out with tool rests that they work really, really well. They've got a nice groove in it. They're uniform. You can move them up and down without changing the distance in and out. So I use that particularly for sharpening skews. I can take a skew and put it on there and just just move it side to side either way, and I get a really nice grinding on a skew with that. A few years ago, a guy by the name of Robo, his real name is escapes me. He goes by the name Robo Hippie. Came out with this tool rest where on the side he's got different degrees marked. And so to change an angle, you just pull the pin out, you rotate it to the angle you want, you put the pin back in, and it works really, really well for repeatability. And I use this a lot for my scrapers, similar to Sam. On all of my scrapers, I've taken a sticky back and I've marked on here the angle degree that I used for sharpening this tool. And so this particular scraper ends up being 50 degrees. So I would go in and I'd set this to the 50-degree angle. I'd move it relatively close to, and I'd go in here and put this on here and just grind it at 50 degrees. So I can do that very, very quickly. If I'm using the scraper and I lose the edge, it's just a matter of pulling it out, coming over, going, and it's back sharp again. And you get a really, really good burr on it. And all of my bowl gouges are pretty much uniform at about 55 degrees. They vary a bit. My bottom feeder bowl gouge is set at about 60 or 65 degrees. So I can get down and through the bottom of the bowl easily. To sharpen a detail or a roughing spindle gouge, I would just go with the arm, and I would set this in, and like Sam said, I'd take a little magic marker and I'd hand rotate this. I got a perfect line on there. So now it's just a matter of getting up to speed and it's done. So any questions about sharpening on a as long as you don't change, you're not going to get any difference. I mean, you can whatever you set your jig up for. I've never tried a 2-inch, so I can't. Sorry. Yeah, if you, David, the tool lasts longer. Okay. Well, I don't know if anybody's seen one of these. This is a gouge that's made by Robust, yes. And it's flat all the way back. So you can grind this thing all the way down to that far. Yeah. Yeah, I think you get a longer swept back with a 2-inch outset than a 1 3/4. I've as I said earlier, I've never used a 1 3/4 anything but a 1 3/4 because I bought this one from Doug Thompson and yeah, you really got to bring it around a lot. Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. I think Sam went through most of the tools on the Tormek. We can continue to talk about them. I use skews. In most cases, I'll use a skew that is not straight, and I hand grind those off of this jig, off of this platform. And I know somebody's brought, Ed, I think you brought a skew tonight, so we're gonna try and clean up and yeah, we're gonna put a single bevel on it because a skew likes to have single bevels. So yes, I changed Ellie Avicera's skew to the way I like it. Ellie Avicera skew is rounded instead of concave. And I have one tool of his that I still sharpen rounded, but I do it by hand, and I don't even use a jig or anything. It's just strictly hand grind. All of the bowl gouges I have, except for the one that's going around where I used 2 different jigs on it, I take the back bevel off. And I do that by hand. I just will take the bowl gouge and I'll just bring it over and just take the heel off, and I'll do that by hand. So when I'm making that curve around the bottom of the bowl, I don't have a sharp edge on the back end of that gouge that will dig into the bowl and leave marks. It just makes it much easier. So any other questions? I think Sam did such a good job that I'll talk a bit about the way my standard grinder is set up. I have two CBN wheels. One is a 80 grit and one is a 220 grit, and I use the 220 grit mostly for grinding, finishing for a bowl gouge or putting a small burr on a scraper. Sam talked about burrs on scrapers, and I agree with him that if you don't want a big burr on a scraper, you take a diamond stone and you take it off. And then you take this is a carbide rod that I put together and I just run that across it. And now I've got a really nice, fine, sharp burr on that. Sam also talked a little bit about how do you sharpen these little bitty tools that are used for hollowing. And the easiest way of doing that is set the angle that you want up on and find yourself a piece of square steel rod, drill a hole in it, put a set screw and lock this in place. You can set it on your wheel on a flat surface and just run it around. I don't know if I got this set at the right angle or not. It's pretty close. And put a nice finish on that. Questions? Yeah, I had a friend who had a 600 grit, and it will put a really nice edge on a tool, but it takes a while to do it. My personal feeling is you don't need anything better, finer than a 220. Some people have 80 and 180 even. But this is so nice and smooth that it just, I get a real nice finish on it. So I noticed that we have a lot of people that brought tools along tonight. I think we should spend the next probably half hour, 45 minutes helping you sharpen tools. We have 3 stations. Sam's got his Tormek here if somebody wants to try that.